Hello everyone, this is Satyaprakash. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'll show you how to implement basic authentication in ASP.NET Web API. So this is my part 38 of Web API videos. So before going through this part 38, please visit my part 37. So you'll get this part 37 video in my playlist called ASP.NET Web API tutorial. So in 37, I discussed how to fix the HTTPS secure connection in ASP.NET Web API. And you will get the basic videos on what is ASP.NET Web API and how to implement and what are the features, and these are all related to the for beginners, intermediate and experienced candidates, which are very beneficial for real-time projects as well as their learning purpose. So guys, I'll go to my presentation here. So in this video, I'll discuss what is basic authentication in ASP.NET Web API and SQL script to create a table, how to update ADO.NET Entity Data Model, create a class that checks if username and password are valid, and create a basic authentication filter, how to enable basic authentication, testing basic authentication using Fiddler API tool, and testing basic authentication using Postman tool. So first I'll check and I'll show you what is basic authentication in ASP.NET Web API. So guys, basic authentication is a HTTP based communication basic method that means of authenticating end user before granting access to resources or communication. So intended users are instructed to deliver primary credentials like username and login password. So in this method, the base64 encoded data is transmitted through an authorization header. So first of all, if you create any action method on the particular controller of Web API, that means if you want to show the end user as all the details of employee, and on specific filter of employee ID, it will display the details. So you can, as per your requirement, you can put the basic authentication so that the end user cannot access directly, or anonymous users access these URLs of Web API directly without the authenticated user. If the user is authenticated or authorized by the specific owner or admin by basic authentication, like they have the access to username and password, so that they can able to access the particular Web API URL to get the response. Without it, the anonymous users or external users cannot access this URL. If those they have the URL, they cannot show the response as well. So that is nothing but the basic authentication in ASP.NET Web API. The second point is we need to create a SQL script, so that for what is the requirement for this video. So guys, I'll go to my SQL server. So I have created one table called users. These are three columns: ID, username and password. So ID is the identity column and username and password. So this is the insert statement. So I put both the username and password as a male and female, and this is my, after creating this, if you execute, I'm getting this response: username male, password male, username female, and password female. So you can give any type, any username password as per your requirement. So here I put some notes here. So I already discussed step 1 is what is basic authentication. Step 2 is what is the script to create the table for basic authentication for login and password. And step number 3 is update the ADO.NET Entity Data Model. So guys, I'll go to my Web API project. So my Web API project I have used across all my videos, that is same project as well. So I have created this project from scratch, so you can get this, how this folder structures are created, how to create the ADO.NET Entity Data Model, how to create the Web API project with the controller and methods and related config files. So here, as per the step 3, we need to update the ADO.NET Entity Data Model. So here on the class library employee data access, it is my emp model.edmx. So that is nothing but is a entity data model. So here ADO.NET Entity Data Model, this is my existing one. Before that I have created the employee DET. Okay, and now as per my this requirement, I have created one more ADO.NET Entity Data Model. Okay, so before that this model was not there. So what you will do is you just right click on the exist on the this emp model.edmx, that is edu.entity data model. Right click on the designer surface. Okay, go to select the update model from database, and in the it will loading your retrieve the database information, like you have created database object like tables, procedures and views. So you just expand your table TBOs. Okay, or you can refresh it. Okay, so once you add this, you can see this table will be visible here. That is the what you created, that users table, it will be displayed here. Once it is displayed, you can check here the users. Okay, and you just after check this, you can click on finish. Once you click on finish, it will be added to the entity data model, like you can see here. Okay, so this kind of interface you can see after adding the table what you have created in your database, and how to create the add the edu.net entity data model, or how to update the existing edu.net entity data model. So this is the process. So this is I have this use model I have added for basic authentication in web API for login and password. So step 4 is create a class that checks if the username and password are valid or not. Okay, so for that I'll go to my web API project. So close this one, it is not required. So here in my this web API coding project, okay, I have created one class file. So it is simple, right click on this project and click on add and class. Okay, after then you can see I have created one class called employee security. Okay, so here I have created one class employee security. So here I have added three namespace, that is one system, system.link and employee data access. So this is my this namespace is required to access my SatyaDB entity data model, to access all the classes and properties from this model. This is entity data model, so that I have used this data model. Okay, and inside the class file employee security, I have created one method. Okay, that is this is the boolean type, access modifier as public and static, and I have used three parameters, one username and password. So here I instantiate my class SatyaDB entities. This is my object entities. So I'll return some value. So based on this object, okay, return type dot users nothing but I have created one model file, right, in entity model. So I can access this model from my entities object, and any determines whether any element of a sequence satisfies condition. It returns true if any element in the resource or source sequence pass the test in the specified predicate, or otherwise it will be false. So inside I have class user as a user. User is nothing but I can use as object of my users. Okay, and using this user such that user.username, it is nothing but my column name what you have created, equals username and dot comma string comparison. Okay, I have used one enum type string comparison dot original ignore case, that is compare string using ordinal or binary sort tools, ignoring the case of the string is being compared. Okay, so if you right click on the string comparison, go to definition, okay, you can see this is kind of an enum. Okay, and there is a so many enum there, current culture type, and also they have some values they have assigned. Okay, so it is a system defined. So you go to my class, so I can access this string, this properties from this enum type, and user.password equal to password. So this is nothing but this functionality is used for, that is, it checks if the username and password are valid or not. Okay, so I have a XML comments I have put here, a class that checks if the username and password are valid or not. So this is all about the class of employee security. Okay, so step number 5 is we need to create a basic authentication filter class. Okay, which will consume that employee security class as well. So go to my project, so right click on same way and add a class. Okay, and I'll name as a basic authentication attribute. Okay, so in this class what I have done is, these are the required namespaces we need to add to use their already defined classes and its functionalities. So this is my class, create a basic authentication filter attribute, and it inherits from authorization filter attribute. Okay, this is the system defined, provide the details of for authentication authorization filter. So if you right click on, go to definition, so you can see this authorization filter attribute is after class. It also inherit from filter attribute authorization filter and filter. So as I created for authentication filter, it's necessary to inherit from this after class. Okay, and there I have one override method on authorization, because this class already have a method. If you re-implement this method or reuse this method in our custom class, then we need to add a override keyword for on authorization. Okay, and inside I have one parameter passed, http action context. It has an object called action context. So using this as action context object, we need to access the request header and authorization equal to null. Then I am getting the response for action context dot request dot create error response. So it represents an error message. So if it is null, then status code should be unauthorized, and I can see the message that you are not authorized user to check the response. Okay, this is if statement, and in else statement I can declare a variable for string authentication token, and using the action context object request dot headers dot authorization dot parameters. So I am getting the token here, and then decoded to authentication token. So it is using, we can decode the authentication token using base 64. So encoding dot utf-8 get a string. Okay, and convert dot from base 64 string, which is an array of 8-bit unassigned integers that is equivalent to s, or converts the specified string which encodes binary data as a base 64 digits. So this is the already defined, and we can use for decode the authentication token. So inside you can pass this parameter or pass this value of authentication token. Okay, so after then there is one username password we need to specify. Okay, because we have username and password, so that is, for example, username colon password. Okay, so we have what is the decoded authentication response value we are getting, so that it will split with the colon, and it will store in a string array of username password array value, and the first array value. Okay, so this index 0 for this value will store as a username, and index 1 storage 1 will be stored as a password, because this decoded authentication will this username password split with the colon value, and it will stored as the all the values here with the colon. After then it will be divided by the index of with 0 is username, index with 1 as a password. And there is one more condition, if employee security, which we have created right here, employee security for check the valid username or password, we can access the login method, okay, which is a boolean type. So here username password we have passed the parameters. So inside we can current principal get or sets the thread's current principal, okay, and new generic principal, and inside we have one new generic identity which initializes a new instance of generic identity class, represents the user with the specified name, and inside I have passed this username and then null value, okay. So here if the user has uh, passed the correct username and password, then this if statements will be executed, okay, as per the username or password provided by the user, or else this will be executed, that is action context dot response equal to action context dot request create error response, okay. So if the user has provide the valid username password, then they can get the response. If the username password provided by the user not correct, then this else statement will be executed as the response action context dot request dot create error response, and this will be unauthorized, and the user can see a message that past username and password for basic auth are not correct. So there I have implemented two type of create error response, okay. First one is if the user has not provided any basic authentication token or username password, it will show you are not authorized user, check response. And also there is one more step, that is even the user has provided the username password are correct, then they can see the response. If the provided username password are not correct, then this else statement will be executed, and there is also one more create error response is implemented, that is past username and password for basic auth are not correct. So this is the code for basic authentication attribute class, okay. So I'll go to my step 6, how to enable basic authentication. So guys, the basic authentication attribute can be applied on any specific controller, specific action, or globally on all web API controllers. So to enable basic authentication across the entire web API application, register basic authentication attribute as a filter using the register method in web API config class file. So here guys, to register it, there is app_start folder web API config.cs file. So after then we need to add this file config.filters.add and new require https attribute. That means it will register our basic authentication filter, basic authentication across entire web applications, okay. So this is the line to register your basic authentication, and you can also apply the attribute on a specific controller to enable basic authentication for all the methods in that controller. So in my case, we'll just enable basic authentication for get method in web API controller or employees controller. Also modify the implementation of can modify the implementation of get method, which I already have discussed in my earlier videos. So what I'll do is, what I'll do is here all of my web API controllers and action methods, okay. So as per my requirement, I want to implement basic authentication for only this load employee EMP details. That means this action method, it will show all the employee details, okay. But for remaining, that is load employee get int id, that means get employee details based on id. I did not implement any HTTP basic authentication. Only for I implement basic authentication for get all employee details. So for that I have used that basic authentication attribute here. So these are the required namespaces, and you can also add basic authentication attribute here on the header on this section of employee controller. Okay, you can add this, or on specific action method we can add this way. You just add the basic authentication attribute with a square bracket, so that this basic authentication is implemented on the specific action method. Okay, so in this way we can register and implement the authentication in our specific controller and action method of our web API project. So yeah, this is all about the implementation in code level. So I'll close this, and our next step is how to testing the basic authentication using fiddler. So before checking, I need to run my web API project. So guys, here my API URL loads properly. Here I'm getting message you are not authorized user to check the response, because this endpoint is hitting to my this web API action method. So it will not show any response because I have implemented the basic authentication attribute, so that without any authentication token or username password, the response will not be shown. So that it is showing my message as you are not authorized user to check the response. That means it's executed my that basic authentication class. I have implemented one message, so the same message is displayed here. Okay, so I'll copy here, copy this file, copy this URL, go to the fiddler. So this is the fiddler API testing tool. Okay, and click on compose and paste here my URL. Okay, and now what I'll do is if you remove all and if you execute it, so you can see 401 unauthorized. Okay, so that because in my composer tab I have not implement any type of authentication. So guys, to testing basic authentication using fiddler, the username password needs to be colon separated and base 64 encoded. So for base 64 encode string, there is one site. Okay, so this is called base 64 encode.org. Okay, and here in the text box I have used mail : mail. So this mail is username : mail is password. Once you click on encode, there is one string encoded. That's one string is generated. Okay, I have used this string in my authentication part. So I already have done this. So authorization : so go to the fiddler and paste here authorization : basic, and this is the string which I generated for base 64 encoded. Okay, and click on execute. Before that I need to remove. So once I execute, okay, yeah, 200. Okay, I am getting all the response here, right? See here. And same way for female, that is we have one more password, right? Female. So same way for female : female, and there is different encode string is generated. So I'll copy this one, go to fiddler, and in fiddler I'll remove all. So instead basic, I have used this authorization token. So I'll execute. So I'm getting the response also here, right? So if I'll pass any valid authentication information like some valid data and execute, I'm getting, you know, uh, yeah, one more time I'll execute. So here I'm getting the no response data, right? So okay, if I'll remove okay, before that base 64, okay, click continue. Okay, if you pass the valid one, execute, now I'm getting the proper response here, right? So this response I'm getting based on the valid authorization basic authentication token. Okay, and how to check in your Postman? So Postman, it is very simple actually. So what I'll do is copy this URL. Okay, go to the Postman. In the URL tab I paste here, and in the authorization uh, here a type is select as a basic auth. Okay, and here I put as username as mail and password mail. So because we have created the mail and mail username mail password, right? So there is nothing like we have passed for checking response in fiddler. We need to create a base 64 encoded string, and we can encode this value and implement in our fiddler. Okay, so in fiddler this is different process to implement the basic authentication and to check the response, but in Postman it will be very straightforward. So we just click on authorization tab, basic authentication type, username mail, and what are the username password need to put, and click send. So see guys, I'm getting the proper response. So same way, if you put here female and female, I'm getting the proper response 200. Okay, so if we'll pass the invalid username password, so see I'm getting past username or password for basic auth are not correct. And if you'll not select the basic authentication like no auth, then I'm getting the different error message, that is you are not authorized user. So see, you are not authorized user to check the response, because I have implemented two type of create a response if the user is not authorized or not select the authentication type, and if the user select authentication type but he or she will pass the invalid username credential. So here the message will shown as uh, past username and password for basic auth are not correct. Okay, so yeah, I'll go to my employee controller. Okay, so guys, here what I'll do is I will comment this line. Okay, sorry. Okay, I'll comment this line and stop the debugging here. Here I paste. Okay, and what I'll do is I will use as a string username. Okay, equal to thread dot I have added the namespace here, system threading. Okay, thread dot current principal dot identity dot name. Okay, so and then I have instantiated my SatyaDB entities. Okay, and there I have used one switch statement, that is instead of gender I want to use as a username dot lawyer, and I'll remove this one. So if my case is my username is male, it will return request create response http status code okay entities dot employee db entities dates dot where it is such that okay e dot gender dot lawyer equal to male to list. If the case is female, request dot create response status code is okay, and using the entities object I can access the employee db entities employee dates dot where is such that e dot gender dot lawyer equal to female to list, and default so here default as I'm used as the request created response, that is employee http status code bad request, value for gender must be male, female, or all gender is invalid. Okay, or we can do it in other way. Instead of that, if we return request create response, okay, so I can type this way, request dot create response http status code dot bad request. Okay, so this is case male, female, and for default. So default is nothing but it will be if there is no male or female, then it will return as a bad request create response. Okay, so that is nothing but so first what I response I shown, that is even the username and password male female, for both username the response I'm getting same, right? But here based on the username, if the username is male, then it will show only the male gender. If the past username is female, then it will show the records for female employees. If there is some bad request or not male female, it will show as the bad request here. Okay, so guys, I'll show my output for this implementation. So I need to run my web API project. So guys, my web API getting response as you are not authorized user to check response as expected. Okay, now we'll check the response in my fiddler. So first of all, I need to remove all my existing part here in the left side, requested URLs. Go to my this for base64 encoded format, which will be encode to base64 format, that is username colon password. So first I'll check for male. So this is my encoded format I'm getting to check response in my fiddler. So go to fiddler. I can see only the I have passed the authorization basic authentication as for male. So here I'll check for that, it will return only male gender. So if we'll execute it, so I can see only the male gender it is showing here, right? So same way, I'll go to composer tab, I'll go to I want to see for female gender. So if the pass as basic authorization colon basic and pass as encode base64 for female username or colon password, so it will display only for female gender. So I can see there is 2 female, so that will show the female gender based on my authentication token. Okay, and if you'll remove that authorization, execute, so I'm getting 401 unauthorized. Okay, let's check in my Postman tool. So in Postman tool, what I'll do is I pass here as male and male, so it will display only male gender. So see here, I can see only the gender whose gender is male, employees whose gender is male. So if you'll pass the username and password as female, click enter, click send, so I'm getting only the employees whose gender is female. And if I'll pass as wrong username password, it's showing that is past username and password for basic auth are not correct. If you'll disable the basic authorization underscore basic authentication, no basic authentication, I'll select as no authorization or authentication and click send. So I'm getting response, you are not authorized user to check response. Okay guys, so in this way we can implement the basic authentication in our web API project, and there is different process to check that basic authentication response in Fiddler tool and Postman tool. Let's go to my notes. So yeah, part 7 is testing basic authentication using Fiddler, part 8 is testing basic authentication using Postman. So I have covered all these 8 points in this video. Go to my presentation. So guys, that's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.